Chair. Palacios. Bernal, Dettel. Montoya. Here. Goldstein. Bauman.
Here.
Harvey.
Present.
Espinoza.
Here.
Vice Chair Corpus. And Chair Mendez.
Here. Any oral communications for items not on the agenda? Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Motion to approve or any items that need to be pulled?
Should approve.
Been moved in second by Vice Chair Corpus. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, public comment, I always forget that part of it, thank you. Any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, not. Thank you, bringing it back to the board, it's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Approved, thank you. Regular agenda, CEO's report. Mr. Habashi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start my report, I'd like to introduce Angela. She's our General Counsel. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself.
It's an honor to be here. I am an attorney. I own Estriadis Law, and I've worked almost exclusively with renewable energy companies for the last decade all over the state. And it's wonderful to have the opportunity to work on issues in my own community. And I'm really excited to be working with all of you, the staff and the public, to make sure that this is a great success.
Thank you and welcome.
First item on my report, Mr. Chairman, is to give you an update on the Community Advisory Council, and I'm going to ask Beth Trenchard to step up and give you that quick update.
Good morning.
Morning.
So here's an update on the Community Advisory Group. I'd like to start from the January special joint meeting of the Policy and Operations Boards in January. If you'll recall, staff proposed 2 stakeholder groups. The first stakeholder group was a community group made up of residents and small business. It had a program-oriented scope as proposed. It focused on programs that would be implemented over the next several years, and it really targeted, greenhouse gas emission reductions as well as electrification. The second group was made up of commercial, industrial, and agricultural customers, and this customer group would host workshops that really targeted technical issues as well as to that customer segment. So those were the 2 groups as proposed. At the joint meeting, however, we heard from several community groups that thank you. Whoops. One more. Okay. So at the January discussion, what we heard from several community groups is they preferred one advisory council, and they preferred to be composed of all customers, so residential, small business, commercial, industrial, as well as agriculture. In addition, they wanted a broader scope. They wanted to include energy programs, but in addition, a discussion around more of an oversight role that had an oversight role of more of the agency's operation. In addition, they wanted the meetings to be ongoing. We heard from several board members that they supported a single community advisory council, but there wasn't a discussion around the scope. So our next steps are first to really analyze all of the variables that go into composing an advisory council group, the size, the composition, the selection process. From there, we will evaluate all the pros and cons of each of those variables. We'll look at various alternatives, and ultimately what we'd like to do is present in March at the policy board meeting a recommendation for their consideration.
Thank you. Is there any comments or questions? Mr. Corpus.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if we had completed any kind of legal analysis. I'm concerned about the duties and responsibilities that this larger group would have vis-a-vis the final policies like budget, rates, etc. We all know what a joint powers authority is, and we know who the signatures are to that agreement. It's great to have advisory groups, but I'd hate to have anybody singularly or collectively exposed or the whole system exposed unnecessarily. So I'd like to make sure that we're on good legal footing as we add and, members to whatever the policy board is, or the operation board is, or to this either one of these options.
Yeah, we certainly will be looking at the function and the scope of work for the advisory group, and make sure that we don't either put them or put anybody else into an issue dealing with legal problems that could eventually be faced. And that's some of the work that Angela is going to be helping us with.
Mr. Baumann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My suggestion is that we can consider simplifying this, and rather than have multiple committees, have a single committee and have clear and unambiguous bylaws that clarify what the scope and purpose of the advisory committee is. And I assume it would be Brown Act. And we have a similar setup with our Salinas Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and it's very clear what their role is and responsibility.
That's the intent, and we're also going to be looking at other advisory groups that work with other CCEs and see what's the best practices are, make sure that we are following the right ones.
I just want to make sure, sort of clarify, at the conversation, the advisory committee, one group, I think I echo all the comments that have been said by other board members, but I think there was I see some misunderstanding, at least on one of them, as far as you talking to the big ag users or sectors. You don't have to have a committee to do that. Obviously, that's part of just running a CCE. So I think that it's really important if you can have a broad committee for each individual board member, each potential member of that committee to understand their purpose. And so I don't want to get lost the fact that you shared with us that you were going to be talking to the big ag users, some other sectors, which I think can happen without a committee, and I'm assuming that's going to continue to happen.
That is ongoing. That started actually back in November, and we have a dedicated person actually that's been out there talking every day to the ag folks. James Mark is sitting back there, I'm sure, and he knows them all now by first name, and they connect with him all the time. So that is going to continue, advisory board or not.
Okay, just to get the expectation out there. Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Right. Thank you.
Second issue to update you on is a quick report from Mark Buckman about the launch or the opt-out report so far.
Morning. So I think the overall takeaway is that enrollment is proceeding very well. We have less than 1% opt-out rate. Currently updated as of this Monday, there's 23 total customers that have chosen to opt out, and they represent about 22.3 gigawatt hours out of a total of 2,500 gigawatt hours on the non-residential side. So the majority of reasons given, either through the call center or through the web, are usually philosophical reasons that they don't like being automatically enrolled, or they have concerns about a government-run power agency. But for the most part, for our large key accounts, both on the agricultural and commercial side, we've been having really good positive conversations. Most concerns have been about making sure that enrollment is not disruptive to existing PG&E programs or services that they receive. And I think we've been addressing those concerns very well and have been proceeding along at a good pace without, many surprising opt-outs. And I think the main takeaway is just how valuable it is for the community that we're competitive in terms of rates and cost with PG&E. That's a commonality across industries with all customers, that the rebate really is impactful. And I think that's an important point for all of our non-residential customers so far.
Any questions or comments from the board? Thank you.
Next item, Mr. Chairman, is to discuss updates on power supply acquisition. For the short term, if you recall, our round number 1 was back in December, and the intent back then was to hedge all of our power supply needs for 2018, a portion of 19, 20, 21, and 22, smaller portion as we go up the years. We did not at the time fill all the open positions that we were set out to do, and we decided to postpone some of the acquisition. We had a short still on energy side, and a large short on type 1 renewables, and a very small short position on carbon free. For round 2, we are now hedged fully on the energy side of the business, that's what I wanted to make sure that we do before launch. We also hedged fully the carbon free. We're still up a little bit on a type 1 renewable because we are anticipating the Pacific Gas and Electric sometime close to the end of next week, maybe announcing or opening the door for us to bid on some of the surplus type 1 renewables that they have, and that will give a little bit more supply into the market, which seems to be a little bit tight nowadays. So that is my quick report. And we also filled in positions for 2019, 2020. So far, on the short-term side, we are moving along. We're going to probably not try to do it all at once, because as it turned out, the larger position that you're trying to fill, the higher the price. All the suppliers tend to bid in tranches, and the first one is the least expensive one. As you go up, as you buy more, you have to pay more. So we decided then that maybe it's best that we break up our buys into a number of segments, maybe 3, 4, 5, and instead of just going out and trying to do it all in one time. As it turned out, with that second round, we did really well on energy side of the hedge, and the carbon free as well. We still have that open position on the type 1 renewable, which we're going to fill pretty soon. With that, and if you don't have any questions, I can go on to long term. We are in negotiations simultaneously with 3 different suppliers now. 1 is a wind supplier, and 2 are solar plus storage. And the negotiations are moving well. We anticipated that we were going to be done in February. As it turned out, we're still hammering issues of credits. The credit apparently is a huge issue for most of these developers, because they have to show to the bank that they are dealing with a credible entity, and in doing so, they have certain conditions that they want us to meet, and we try to negotiate that to something that would be more reasonable, so we don't have to post a large amount of money in case we don't have enough money to cover our obligations. So that is taken on a little bit more time, and it does highlight the very important issue that we need to be very prudent, especially in the first few years, on our spending, in order to make sure that we have sufficient reserves and get a credit rating. Because once we get a credit rating, all these obligations that we have to do and all these indices that we have to meet on an annual basis probably go away, because you do now have a credit rating, and it's better than a certain rating. That helps a great deal when you have to negotiate with for long-term supplies. But we are still anticipating that sometime in March or April we'll be concluding all the negotiations, and hopefully we'll be bringing you some contracts at that time. Any questions that I can answer on that one? Short term, long term?
Yeah, Mr. Corpus?
Tom, you mentioned in your report you're acquiring on the short term enough of a hedge. So I know that's your lingo, but for me, I don't know, is that a 5% hedge, 10% need?
I apologize. Generally, when I say hedge, I mean we have fixed our price for the energy that we need for 2018. All the energy that we're going to need, we're going to buy from the ISO. That energy we get from the ISO, the price of it changes on hourly basis, on daily basis, monthly basis, changes all the time. Now we pretty much set the price for the amount of supply that we think we're going to need for that, for every hour with a supplier. So regardless of how the price that we get from the ISO changes, the price what we pay for it eventually is set. So that's what I mean by hedge. So we have locked in prices for all of the hourly supply that we're going to need. That doesn't mean that we off the hook as far as risk is concerned, because what we buy from the supplier on hourly basis, probably almost, I'm definitely certain that it will not match what we will actually use, because forecasts usually don't match reality when it happens. But it should be pretty close. It will not be close on hourly basis, but it certainly on monthly basis will be a lot closer. And definitely on annual basis will be a lot closer. So the more we hedge, the closer we get to 100%, the more certain of what our costs at the end of the year will look like.
Thank you for the explanation.
Sure thing.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Moving on.
Next item is we're going to be discussing later approval of risk management policy. And I just wanted to fill you in that once that risk management policy is approved, I would like to put together an ad hoc group that I would select. It's not going to be something that needs approval, but it will be a group that will be made up of staff members. Most likely will be, also I would like to have folks from both boards on it to kind of follow on what we do when it comes to power acquisition, especially on the short term, because or how we manage our risk. That's very important that you folks will have somebody that will eventually be aware of what's going on when it comes to power supply acquisition. This is 95%, almost 95% of our expenses and it needs. Not just to know that we're not going to exceed 5 cents per kilowatt hour, which you have approved, thankfully, but also that you know the details of what we do and why we're doing it when it comes to the acquisition of power supply. I just wanted to make you aware, Mr. Chairman, that this is going to happen.
Okay, great.
Mr. Habashi, I would recommend that you work with the chairs of each of the board to just help work with them to decide who's on the ad hoc committee from each of the committees. That way they're aware. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, moving on.
Last update is marketing update, and we got Peter over here.
Morning.
Morning.
We've had great luck connecting with the business community by pushing content out through business organizations and business associations. Any story is best received when it comes from a trusted source. It's also proven to be a very efficient way to connect with the business community. We've also had the fortune of getting great feedback from our key account managers, Mark Bachman and James Mark. That's really allowed us to cater our message to be very specific and very relevant for the business community, for the ag community, and for the tourism community. From a press and media outreach standpoint, our media and communications coordinator, Shelley Whitworth, has been busy building relationships with media, building up our media kit, and really putting us in the best position possible to make the most of media outreach as that ramps up through this month. From a general community outreach standpoint, our community outreach coordinator, Mark Odato, has been busy booking events, making presentations, and I think in the short term here, we're going to see his focus slowly start shifting away from the business community and closer. From a strategic partnership standpoint, we've had a lot of luck forging relationships with the college and universities. those relationships will be beneficial for us down the line, and relationships that we look forward to leveraging as we continue marching towards residential rollout. As we continue to take on more business customers, we're also identifying customers who have shared values with us, and customers who have a big network and represent an opportunity for us to really promote together shared values. From a communications asset standpoint, we're tackling these from a couple of areas. On the customer side, a lot of our business customers are very excited to share some of the benefits of our service, to share with their customers. Stuff like carbon-free, contributing to the economic vitality of our region, and helping to support community organizations. So those customer toolkits are something we're working on through the rest of this month, and be a nice opportunity for our customers to plug and play efficiently information that's really marketable for them. On the internal side, our toolkit really is just continuing to beef up our marketing collateral. Looking ahead to Phase 2 in residential launch, we're in the process of designing a public forum series that's going to hit all 3 counties April through June. The focus of that series will be education on the CCA model, on MBCP enrollment, on MBC values, and ultimately what the impact on the community is. We are also, that series also represents a great opportunity for us to start leveraging our strategic partners, and will also be a great opportunity to really put a concerted effort into growing our online and social community. Looking to the residential launch on July 1st, we're excited to be commemorating that launch by hosting our first annual Community Energy Festival. It's still a working name, but the concept is a celebration of green energy, sustainability, and community organizations, all wrapped up in the form of a family-friendly community educational event. A little premature probably for 2018, but I think moving forward, this is really going to be a great forum for us to showcase our direct programming. And the plan is for it to be pilot year here, a pilot project here in 2018, and in 2019, do a 3-part event series in each of the 3 counties. Last but not least here, media protocols. I'm not going to bother reading the entire protocols. The full document is attached to the CEO report. But I did want to use this opportunity to invite all of you to reach out to us, to reach out to myself and Shelley Whitworth, a media communications coordinator, whenever you're in contact with media. Even a casual conversation can be an opportunity for us to continue building positive relationships with media, and maybe even turn a small story into something bigger. So again, the media protocols document is attached to the CEO report. My contact info is in there, but I'm also happy to share a business card with anyone at the end of it.
Thank you. Any comments? Mr. Palacios?
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. I noticed that the March 1 event and the July 1 event, they're both in the city of Monterey. And I know your offices are going to be in Monterey. So I just warn you to spread the wealth around, and to make sure and have, if you're going to have public events, to not just have them in the city of Monterey, have them in Salinas, have them in Hollister, have them in city of Santa Cruz, move them around. I think if there's always going to be a danger, because your offices are located there, to become very Monterey-centric. And we want to, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of positive press that's available to us, and I think we don't want to look at this as a Monterey, city of Monterey agency. We want to look at it as a TriCounty agency, as it was originally generated. The other thing I'd like to do is ask that you reach out to our public information officer. We have one in the county, I'm sure Monterey does, and some of the other cities do, and so that we can connect and they can help you navigate some of getting these stories out and push them with their contacts in the press that they have. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. We'll definitely take you up on that and reach out to the public information officers. And I do appreciate you recognizing that we're a 3-county JPA, and it's something that's on our minds. I think as we're kind of just getting started here, it's a little bit of a logistical consideration. But as evident by the event we're going to do, kicking off residential, we definitely have a plan to do that in all 3 counties next year, and try and keep that in top of mind.
Hello?
Yeah, on the way in this morning, actually, there was an interview on KSCO, or at least a discussion on KSCO about trying to get a representative from PG&E to talk about their program that they do for low income, trying to give them positive press, and actually they declined to respond, and it actually turned into a negative story for about 10 minutes. They kind of went on about how they were non-responsive. So that may be an opportunity to reach out and discuss what Monterey Bay Community Power is to the radio community that listens in the morning.
Charles?
And just another comment. We were at an event about 2 weeks ago down south, and one of the other council members from Monterey asked me, if you're a residential customer and you have paperless billing and you pay your bill online on PG&E, how are they going to know the difference? Is there going to be some sort of communication from PG&E that you now have to pay your bill electronically through Monterey Bay Community Power? How's that going to work?
Well, we are doing mailers. Our commitment for both business and residential is 2 mailers prior to enrollment, 60 days and 30 days out, and then 2 mailers post-enrollment, 30 days afterwards and 60 days afterwards. Those are kind of our, our foundational sort of fallback notifications. But as we continue to ramp up media opportunities here and just telling our story through all the outlets that we're able to, we hope that people are more informed.
Corpus.
Thank you. So on the TriCounty Public Forum Series, do you have more detail about how many you'll have, who will be on the forum, locations?
Not at this time, no. We're looking at April, May, June, and we've been pretty laser focused in on March 1 launch. So we're in the design phase now, but we'll definitely be building a panel of speakers and be doing a minimum of 1 large-scale public forum in each of the counties.
Well, just as Carlos mentioned, we offer to help you with our public outreach efforts as well.
Oh, thank you kindly.
Goldstein.
In the media press protocols that are attached in our staff report, are these intended to be guiding your staff, Tom, in terms of their interactions with the media? Is that the audience for this document?
Not just our staff, actually. We're hoping that would be a guide for the boards as well. We do want you to connect with us every time you get a media contact about the agency and what we do. We certainly can help you, and not just that, but we want to take advantage of the opportunity that may be created by the media when they connect with you to be able to come in and try to get our message out in more than one way. So it is really, the document is intended for the agency as well as its boards.
Mr. Baumann?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, I just wanted to suggest, if you haven't done already, to schedule presentations to the mayors' associations in each of the 3 counties, because not all the representatives are currently represented on the policy board. And at my last meeting, there was a lot of confusion about how Monterey Bay Community Power worked. So I think it would be beneficial if you scheduled those, and I assume Santa Cruz and San Benito has mayors' associations. It's a good educational opportunity.
Of course.
And I just heard some comments at that meeting about the card was hard to read, the mailer. So that may be something that you reconsider.
Okay.
To follow back up on the media press protocols, my suggestion, I think, would be that if we do intend these to apply to board members, my suggestion might be to bring this back for a full discussion with the board, because in here it seems to suggest essentially not being able to answer reporters' questions. And I think for many of us around this table, we have pretty deep relationships with local media, and I'm comfortable talking to them at a high level about what we're doing here. I don't want to step on your toes, obviously, but at the same time, I also recognize the need for technical questions to be referred to the most appropriate folks who can answer those. So to make sure that we're all on the same page and operating with a shared understanding with you and the rest of the board, it seems maybe a little bit more of a full discussion could be warranted, so we're sharing the same expectations.
Sure, to the extent that you would like us to bring it back as an item for approval, a recommendation to follow these protocols or something that a little less or more, we certainly can do that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may follow up on what Lou and Jamie had to say.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we have maybe probably 3 or 4 different events almost every week wherever we're going. We're getting questioned a lot, all the time, no matter where we go. So I think this needs to be a little bit broader of a discussion, if you don't mind.
Sure, of course.
Okay. Well, you got direction, I think, on the board to bring this back. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So that's the end of the CEO's report, right?
Yes.
Okay, so moving on to item 11, approval of energy risk management policy and procedures.
Mr. Chairman, would you like to open
I'm sorry.
for public questions?
Geez, yeah. As you can tell, I'm so used to telling my mayor and council to do that. I'm not doing it. Any comments from the public?
Thank you, Kevin Dayton. I represent Clear Honest Options and Clean Energy Coalition of business and ratepayer advocacy groups in Monterey County. First, I want you to know that Mark Buckman and James and Mark have been doing an excellent job in doing reaching out to business groups. I've seen them repeatedly at various meetings of organizations, and they're doing a good job of getting out the message about why companies should choose to go with you rather than opting out with PG&E. So they're doing a great job for you. I give you some caution. You heard the report that a few companies are choosing not to be involved because of philosophical issues. And you do need to be careful. You had one of your staffers talking about looking for companies that share the values of the agency. And that sort of brings up the question is, what are the values of the agency? And as far as Clear Honest Options and Clean Energy is concerned, you should be providing clean, dependable electricity at reasonable rates for your customers. And if there is another value that's coming into play here, that's something that businesses need to know about and customers so that they can make their philosophical decisions about it. I know there is a fear out there with businesses and some residential customers that after a couple of years, the rates on this agency are going to skyrocket, and then there'll be all sorts of manipulation and activity to force people into it. And you know some of the reasons for that, as so many different community choice aggregation agencies are formed, and the resulting demand there is going to be on a limited amount of renewable energy. So I warn you, be careful when you start talking about companies that share your values and companies that don't. Hopefully everybody shares your values if you have a value system here that's appropriate. And maybe it would be worth, you didn't really talk about it much at the workshop a couple weeks ago. What are your values, and ultimately what do you want to do, and how do you want to do it in the way that best benefits the community? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, requests, or from the public?
Hi, my name is Seth Capron. I'm from San Benito County. In terms of outreach, I just had a comment sort of in response to what one of the board members said. I wondered if it would be possible for the jurisdictions involved in the JPA to use some of the mailings they already do to get the word out to customers and sewer bills or water bills. I don't know if there'd be some conflict there, but it seems like an opportunity for a really cheap distribution of information. I also just wanted to comment briefly about the community involvement committee that we're looking at setting up. And we really appreciate that staff is responding to some of the comments they heard and doing some ongoing look about how that might be tweaked from what the original proposal was. And, you know, we're really, a lot of people have been involved in this from the start and are really interested, and we really hope that the staff and the boards will really see that as an asset to the process. A lot of people really want to work collaboratively and be helpful in terms of defining the agency as it gets established and moves forward. And I think all of you know from your work that public hearings such as this are not always the ideal channel of communication, and that actually an involved, informed citizen committee that was working in their communities and bringing information back could be a real asset for you guys in getting information in a little bit more full way than can happen here from the podium. And I think that you know, it's common for boards to have advisory committees such as these. Quite often they don't have a very limited scope, they have a broad scope. A lot of times they'll, maybe at the request of the board even, they might take up specific issues where, you know, you guys have a million things on your plate. So that committee might be able to do a little bit deeper dive and come back with a perspective for you. And also I think that committee like that can be a great partner along with staff in rallying the public for regulatory issues such as the Public Utility Commission hearing that's coming up in a couple of days, or coming up tomorrow. So we look forward to getting this sorted out and getting something set up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Michael Saint with Citizens Climate Lobby as well as Sensible Transportation. And I just wanted to remind everybody on the 20th meeting, I believe we did hand out something. This is concerning the Community Advisory Committee, and I don't know if everybody got one of these. The thing that Seth was mentioning about a group of us getting together, we've already gone through a lot of the CCEs in the area that are formed already, took best practices and things like that, and it might be an outline that you could actually go over and maybe get some ideas, cross things out, whatever would work for your review in the future. I just wanted to make a couple comments about the CACs that have been formed already. This was from Woody Hastings, who is actually the Renewable Energy Manager for the Center of Climate Protection. His is his summary of what Sonoma Clean Power has done with its CAC. He says, I will tell you that my own view and based on my experience with Community Advisory Committee at Sonoma Clean Power, it is one of the highlights of the organization and the place where most interesting in-depth conversations happen between members of the community, the staff and appointees of the Community Advisory Committee itself, and occasionally board members attend. There have been many instances where the Community Advisory Committee was instrumental in identifying opportunities, issues, and proposals that had not been identified, but that needed to be resolved. Also, just being in the audience here and listening to all the things that have to be done with Monterey Bay Community Power, and especially in the near future, it seems like you could use our help publicly. A couple instances would be outreach and education, going along and actually helping people with understanding this without having to send staff and board members out to do this. Another thing I just want to mention, if you have the time, since this is the operations board, look up Squaw Alpine Renewable Energy for 2018. They're basically going to be totally sustainable, hopefully by that time. So they'll actually be 27 years ahead of California's goal of 2045. Another thing that could be done by the Community Advisory Board would actually be able to go on these little trips, maybe go up to Squaw Valley, which I would like to do myself, and see how they did it. They're actually putting in battery storage and that kind of thing. I know that's a future thing for us right now. We do have to get our funds up, which Tom has mentioned, which is very important. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Hi, Heidi Sams with Communities for Sustainable Monterey County, and I want to also express our appreciation for Tom and his staff and the boards in their spirit of collaboration and working with some of these groups that have been somewhat responsible for getting us here today and starting back several years ago. And also to echo what Mr. Montoya had to say, we too are getting questions all the time because we have been working on this with our own constituents for several years. So we encourage staff to reach out to us so that we can all get our stories on the same page and that we really are a benefit to you and not stepping on anyone's toes, because we're here, we come to these meetings all the time. We are definitely open doors and ready and willing to help in any way we can. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public? Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Great comments. Moving on to item 11.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request to approve the energy risk management policy. Energy risk management, it's not a new thing, really. It's been with us, with this industry, with the electric utilities since probably around the year 1996 when the deregulation took place in the state of California. And everyone was allowed to actually go and buy the power that they need to buy from the market and use and use the investor-owned utilities transmission lines to deliver that power. Many people, and I can assure you myself as well, started to learn about energy risk management at that time, because before that, everything was set, prices were set. There was no question about how much you're going to pay for the energy. Not anymore. Since that time, energy prices have fluctuated greatly, and if you're around in the year 2000, 2001, I'm sure all of you were, you've been through the energy crisis, which saw the bankruptcy of quite a few companies, very large companies, among them, of course, PG&E went bankrupt in 2000 because they couldn't buy the energy at a very high price and try to sell it at a fixed price to the retail customers. We've learned how to manage risk for some time now, and it's key and it's very important that we actually have a risk management policy that will guide our activities when we go out and acquire energy in the future. So this is pretty much the purpose of this policy, is to kind of make sure that we are managing our risk, and it applies for the energy procurement, mostly for short term, anything that we buy either in the day ahead, month ahead, year ahead, even going all the way to 5 years, that would be managed by this policy. We would like to form a risk oversight committee, and that's something that I've done already in 2 different cities, as well as at Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and it was done almost precisely in the same fashion every time. It is a committee that's chaired by the CEO or the department head. At the time I was with the cities. It is not selected or appointed by the board, because if you do that, then it becomes a Brown Act. And it will not be able to do the business that it's supposed to do, which is look at all the different prices and the strategies for hedging all those prices, something that we need to do, obviously, not out in the open, because we don't want to give our suppliers and here's exactly how we're going to go about acquiring power, because that will help them figure out exactly how to fix the prices. Anyway, going back to the energy, the policy, of course, is going to have to be approved by the board, by the policy board, you as well as the policy board. But the risk oversight committee will be formed later on. Generally, the goals is to maintain our rates to be competitive, and also to make sure that the power that we buy is either carbon-free or low carbon. And of course, make sure that we have the financial reserves that will allow us to be able to manage additional future risks that we may encounter. The type of risks that we have, well, customer opt-outs is the biggest one. Unlike Pacific Gas and Electric, they can buy power, and the CPUC will tell them to buy whatever power that they want them to buy and pay for it, whatever amount of money that they will pay for it, and they guaranteed their money back from the customers. They have that even if the customer leaves them and become a CCA customer through the PCIA or the power indifference charge. We don't have that luxury with our customers. If they opt out, they can opt out anytime they want. So we have to be very careful about how we set our rates, so we can prevent that from happening. Because if they do opt out, then you have to raise your rates to meet your obligation, and if you do that, then you go into a death spiral very quickly. Market prices are definitely a risk. That's why we always have to stagger our buys and not buy it all in one time. The volumetric risk is another one. What you buy is usually not exactly what you sell. They are different on an hourly basis, so we have to be aware of that. There's modeling risk, of course. Legislative and regulatory is a huge one for us, especially when it comes to readjusting the PCIA every year. Then beyond that, there are, of course, other risks, operational, reputational, and counterparty, and all that's is highlighted in a policy that's before you. So the risk Management Committee will be chaired by myself. What I'd like to do is to have it be made up of 3 policy board members, 3 operational board members. This is not set yet, so it's more or less a guideline of what I'd like to do. And of course, the Director of Power Supplies, as well as the Director of Internal Operations. And we're going to have the people that will be staffing and giving the presentations will be the people that will be doing the scheduling and coordination for us. And of course, some of the consultants that we are using. This is kind of a guideline, so Delegation of Authority, how much the Risk Management Committee, for example, can approve. They can approve up to a term limit of 60 months, and these are the different volumes that they can approve up to. Once the policy board delegates that authority, then it is understood that when we go out and fill all these open positions, then we can do it with these guidelines and with these limits in mind. In other words, I can't, on my signature, go out and commit Monterey Bay to more than 36 months contract. If I want to go into a 4th year, then I better go and work with the Risk Management Committee first and get their okay to go into a 4th or a 5th year. And also, I have certain limitations as far as the dollars as well as the volume is concerned. There's a counterparty credit policy, and you'll see that in the policy guideline, as well as position tracking, reporting. All that's going to be done by 3 different offices that usually you would have in any organization that does transactions at the volume that we do. You got the front office, the middle office, and the back office. Generally, the front office is the one that do the trades, the ones that get the volume, are told how many years, and here's the volume that we need. They go out and execute the trades. The middle office are the ones that do all the planning and do all the number crunching, so to speak, to figure out what needs to be bought and when. And finally, the back office that makes sure that the contracts match with the actual operation that's taking place day to day by the suppliers working with the trading office. All that's going to be done, and there will be weekly counterparty credit exposure, monthly risk analysis, and so on and so forth. If we are to revise the policy, then we will need to go back to the board for approval. If we are to revise the procedures, that will require only the Risk Management Committee. And that, Mr. Chairman, concludes my report, and I do request your approval of the risk management plan, risk management policy.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Just one. This, of course, is fundamentally different than what we do as city and county administrators. It's a completely different world, and I speak for myself. My spending authority is downright paltry compared to this. It's in the tens of thousands of dollars. And certainly, you and your team have expertise to do these types of things, and it's years, if not decades, of learning. But my only question is, we're subject to all types of audits and oversight, and this is a lot of money potentially that could be at risk. And is there any type? I haven't thoroughly, obviously, read the policy, of gleaned through it, but what type of audit protocols follow this, if any? If you are specifically addressing the auditing the power acquisition, that is done on weekly basis with the transactions that we do through the ISO. So the ISO balances everything that you buy and sell, and they already have the prices for what you have to pay and what you're going to get from the ISO for selling it to them, then how much you're going to pay to the ISO for buying it back and deliver it to the customer. All that's done on a weekly basis by the ISO. The Risk Oversight Committee in the back office will be constantly, our back office, will be constantly auditing and reviewing the contracts relative to the power that's being delivered, and given the price in the contract, make sure that everything is being done correctly. We also have the scheduling coordination doing that on a daily basis, because they have to bid in the day ahead into the ISO all the energy that we have bought and eventually the ISO will tell us on a weekly basis how much we end up buying and do all the appropriate balancing. Not to mention that at the end of the year, we're going to do the standard audit that you're all very familiar with, where you get a few people going in and they go into a conference room and they disappear for days, and eventually they come out saying, here's the audit, and give you a report on it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could maybe
Yeah,
add
Mr.
on that.
Montoya.
I guess for us, even as city managers, we have our checks and balances. Nothing comes to me without a signature from the finance director to make sure this is what we're adequately supposed to be buying. We're following some purchasing policies. We're doing that. Are there any types of those checks and balances in there and not relied upon one individual that can make that single purchase?
To the extent that that you approve the guidelines that we have in here, that's will be the only thing that we're going to be looking at. So, for example, at one point or another, the director of the power supply will be allowed to go and lock in some prices for over 24 months, but the dollar amount that they can spend cannot exceed certain amount. All done, obviously. Engaging in the transaction itself.
Okay, Mr. Palacios?
I think it's very difficult for us to provide oversight on something like this because it's so technical. And I wonder if there's, I'm assuming this is similar to the other CCE's risk management policies?
Yeah, I believe the first CCE that put together a risk oversight committee and a risk management policy is Silicon Valley Clean Energy. I've seen some other CCEs that have done it, but it was very rudimentary and not very comprehensive. Everything else was being done just like the way we've done it in the last several months. You just say, I need to buy a certain amount of energy. You get an okay to buy up to this amount of dollars or this amount of, or if you buy it's at less than a cents per kilowatt hour, then you go and you engage the suppliers and try to do the best thing that you can. For the short term, the long term is a different story, of course. But we're probably going to be the second. I think Peninsula may be looking into doing something similar. I'm pretty sure East Bay now is looking at it as well.
I wonder if there are.
Policy.
I wonder if there are there consulting firms that specialize in reviewing these kind of documents?
Yeah, the risk policy that we have before you is actually drafted initially by our scheduling coordinator, that's the Energy Authority, and they've been doing this, they've been in that business for about 25 years now, and they have, of course, a very solid policy. A lot of what you saw in that is in ours, with few caveats, of course, that would be more applicable to our size, and that's where the dollar amounts and the quantities, the volumetric amounts came from. That's relative to our size and relative to who we are.
Rahman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Tom, would it be possible, I think what my colleagues are referring to are internal controls, and would it be possible, recognizing that you need to move quickly on these contracts and there's market prices, to establish that 2 individuals would sign off at each level? So it might be the CEO and the director of power or the chair of the committee, so that before a contract is entered, at least there's 2 individuals that have reviewed that.
Most definitely. I mean, I know that we have, you are giving us certain permits to go and sign off on transactions, but it's incredibly unlikely that the department head in charge of power supply or any of the people that work, the trading manager, for example, would want to engage in a large transaction without getting approval up. But if you are asking for on the document itself or on a confirmation agreement that we get with the suppliers that we have 2 signatures, yeah, we definitely can accommodate that.
So if that would be the preference of the board, so we would have at least in any process, you have 2 individuals that are required for sign off, and that covers for errors, fraud, and other aspects that would be associated with internal controls.
Right now, just to be sure that the confirmation agreements that we have engaged in so far, and there are quite a few, all of them have only my signature and a counterparty signature. So I agree. I think that makes plenty of sense. As soon as we hire the power supply director, that will be the second person on the second signature on every transaction we do.
Jamie?
So I think the notion of the internal controls makes a lot of sense. I mean, just the notion of, within my city, if we're going to do a wire transfer beyond X, it can't be generated and approved by one individual. So I think those kinds of internal controls make a lot of sense, and figuring out how to integrate them into the risk management policy is best practice. You made a reference to the fact that Silicon Valley and Peninsula, I'm not sure what their acronym is, but the Peninsula CCA, we're looking at similar types of policies. I guess for more, I know you have a background in both Roseville and Palo Alto, which are very mature public sector power companies. Do they have similar sorts of policies that you drew from when crafting this?
Yeah, I think both of them actually. I'm the one who brought both of them, risk oversight, the risk management policy to both agencies and to Silicon Valley as well.
Okay.
Before I left.
Thank you. And secondarily, this is kind of an out of the box, maybe more of a suggestion than a question at this stage in the game, but it would seem to me that over time, as the CCAs sort of grow and mature, some of the risk associated with these different types of activities that have been identified in this document could be hedged to some degree through partnerships. Specifically, what I mean is with some of the other members around this table, we participate jointly as cities to hedge our risk associated with tort claims, work comp, things along those lines. It would seem to me conceivable that with the right people around the table, multiple CCAs could get together and find a way to hedge this overall level of risk by jointly doing some things together. I'm not enough of a technician to be able to understand the nuances of how that may work in the future, and I understand that's not a priority today. But in the long term, maybe something for you as someone who's very senior in this field and understands it, it seems like an intriguing possibility.
Just a quick comment. I've actually been trying really as hard as I possibly can to work with with the Cal CCA to see if we can create a consortium of CCEs to come together and do power acquisition. Not the short term, mind you, because the short term is really more specific to each one. And they have to do it separately, but to do long-term acquisition, because by doing so, you can get power a lot cheaper. If you build a 100 megawatt resource, it's going to be on a per kilowatt hour basis more expensive than if you build 1,000 megawatt hour resource. And so, and it seems at least so far 8 CCAs are very open to the idea, and they want to come together and form sort of a larger JPA, if you will, in order to buy power for all the agencies. And that will be a way to hedge energy market prices.
One step ahead of me. Thank you.
Yes.
Corpus?
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment Tom and whoever drafted the policy. I think it was well done. Not unfamiliar with municipal power utilities. A lot of similarities. I would just suggest, in terms of the committee being somewhat nimble, you might want to consider just 2 from each of the board. 7, it's hard to get a meeting of policy people and operations people. So whoever is selected has to make that commitment, because it looks like you're going to be meeting more than monthly at times. So that would be just a comment, not a motion, but you might consider a smaller 7-member committee as opposed. And again, I thought the policy was complete.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you.
Mr. Palacios? Palacios. Mr. Montoya, sorry.
We have the same first name, different last name, if I may. One other thing, when we meet on a monthly basis or every other month, I'd recommend that within the notes, whatever, if you can just provide a short one-page list of what was purchased for what period of time, what we're out there, so we at least have a general idea from time to time.
Of course, that makes plenty of sense.
So, any more comments? Before I ask any comments from the public? Great, bringing it back to the board. I think one of the things you're picking up is when we have to respond to, I have authority to spend $40 million, that's not a universe that we're used to. So I think that's what you're picking up from us. So I trust the council has looked at this, and as well, that I'm not too sure the code has evolved to, in your field as opposed to has evolved in us, because we have some real specific things that we can and can't do. So I think you're picking up that sort of response from us. But I think we do recognize the need to be real nimble in this area. So with that, what's the will of the board?
Second.
Been moved and second. Mr. Corpus, any further discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Great, thank you. Moving on to item number 12.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and our department head in charge of support services, Tiffany Law, will be presenting this item.
Thank you. For this item, this is a request to seek the Operations Board recommendations to the Policy Board to adopt the participation in the 401A style retirement plan for us instead of the conventional Social Security or the CalPERS system, and then also direct the CEO to negotiate an agreement with public agency retirement services to administer the retirement plan for MBCP employees. The background is that as a California governmental agency, we have the options to opt out the Social Security as our primary retirement system. There are 3 other options available to us. The first one is California Employee Retirement System, also known as CalPERS, and then the second one is the Public Agency Retirement Services, also known as PARS, or a private plan. After analysis, the first one, CalPERS plan, is a variable contribution defined benefit plan that gone through some major overhaul in the past few years, and then making it less attractive to the prospective employees. Also, their contribution structure increases uncertainties of the cost to us. The second one, PARS, is a consulting group that specializes in providing retirement services for the public agencies. Their largest client is the LA Unified School District with over 80,000 participants. PARS offers plans that combine many of the attractive features such as the Social Security and then also the CalPERS. It's a defined mandatory contribution plan that allows individuals to elect how to invest their retirement fund. Upon retirement, employees can collect their retirement funds as a lump sum or annuities. And then also for PARS, they offer like a very clear advantage over the Social Security system, giving the employees in high cost of living areas such as Monterey Peninsula to make substantial contribution to the Social Security program and eventually reap little in return. And for a private plan, while offering the maximum flexibility to the employees in terms of how to invest their retirement funds, it also carries most risks to the agency and likely with the highest administrative cost. And before considering PARS, we have participated in the Social Security system and the 401A plan to supplement the employee retirement fund, funded at a matching contribution of 5%. And if we continue to move forward with this plan, the total contribution towards employees' retirement fund would be 22.4%, which is 11.2% for employees and then also 11.2% for MBCP. Therefore, we recommend MBCP to offer a defined mandatory contribution matching plan of 10% each, total of 20% to our employees. And MBCP also have a one-time option to choose a retirement plan to secure the future of our employees. And we believe that choosing the 401A mandatory defined contribution plan is the best option to attract and to keep the best talents in our industry. And then PARS is the best suited administrator for the plan. For the fiscal impact, we calculated it will be reduction in contribution to employees and retirement plans ranging from $35,000 to $60,000 annually for the next several years. So we would like to seek your approval to the policy board for us to opt out from the Social Security and also to participate in the PARS retirement plan.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Goldstein.
I think this is a simple question. Would this imply then that we would have two tiers? Some folks that were on the 22.4% plan, and no, everyone would transition to this new PARS
Yes.
plan?
Yeah, everybody will be on this plan.
Great. Thank you.
Any other comments on the board? Questions?
So just a quick question for you, Tom. So having done this before in developing a city in Colorado, once employees get out of the deferment for Social Security, they're gone for 10 years. They have to rebuild back 10 years to go back into the system. So I want to make sure that you're notifying all the employees once this happens. If they choose to be employed there, they will lose it until they get those 40 quarters back into Social Security.
As I understand it, is if you are not in Social Security, and if you have already 40 quarters, you will be receiving Social Security benefits. If you don't have 40 quarters, then you can get back to it later on if those employees decided to leave our agency and go back to a Social Security agency. And then they will just continue on bringing additional quarters to their pot of 40 quarters, so to speak.
Yeah, but you'll lose the annuity, because we had a lawsuit with the employees at the time, and some had to take a lawsuit, take 3 years back from Social Security. So just want to be clear that everybody's aware of the changes getting out of Social Security.
I think, initially when we thought about this, I brought all the employees in my office and said, this is the opportunity we have, do you want it? And everybody seems to agree that this is a good opportunity for them, because I think it probably provides a better option than Social Security, which it's going to be at one point or another a mean testing and a variety of other things that probably will make that not exactly waiting for them when they retire. So might as well put the money where they eventually can get it back.
Any comments from the board? Any member of the public? Great, bringing it back to the board. Well, we only had these options a few years ago before PERS. So anyway, that's my editorial.
I'll move approval of the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Carlos. Second? I'll second. Second by Mr. Montoya. No further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks. Thank you. Moving on to item 13.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you probably know, we have put an organization chart a while back, first month of operation, just to kind of have a framework we can work with. Now, with 5 months behind us, we need to make certain adjustments, and to share that with you. Back again, Tiffany Law.
For this item, we also need to seek the approval from the operations board for the recommendation to the policy board. And again, Tom already shared, like in September 2017, the MBCP board already approved the proposed job classifications, the initial organization chart, the hiring, and the salary schedule. And then right now, we already have a CEO and then also 7 full-time employees and consultant support under the contract to MBCP. And then we already achieved the critical milestones and near the first enrollment phase in March. So there is a need for us to update the initial organization chart to meet our core needs of the operations. Our recommendations would be the addition of a new financial analyst position under the Director of Internal Operations, myself. And for this position, the analyst will provide high level of administrative project coordination and analytical finance support to me. And this new position will result in an average monthly increase of $7,300. And the second recommendation is to add a new power supply analyst 1 or 2 position under the Director of Power Services. For this role, will provide power resources and energy team with data related to acquiring power supplies, risk mitigation, deal structuring, contract negotiations, as well as project development to support the goals of supplying carbon-free power. And this proposed new position will result in an average monthly increase of $6,700. And in December 2017, we executed a consulting services with Mr. James Mark through May 2018. And James has performed the duties of business development manager, focusing on agricultural and industrial accounts and resources management. And then we proposed to change his contract from a contract basis to a new full-time position after March 2018 to provide support for our business development. And for this change, it will result in an average monthly saving of $5,400 from April to May. And then this position will also result in an average monthly increase of $8,600 after May 2018. And then the next recommendation is to add 3 interns, temporary staff, to provide support for the communication and external affairs group, particularly during the enrollment phases in March and July. And this proposed new positions will result in an average monthly increase of $6,900. And then the next recommendation is to retitle marketing manager to marketing and communications manager to accurately reflect the nature of the job and the duties being performed. There is no budgetary impact. And the next one would be to retitle retitle key account manager to strategic account manager. Again, is to accurately reflect the nature of the job and the duties being performed. No budgetary impact. The next one is to reclass the government and external affairs coordinator position is to reclass the government and external affairs manager position to government and external affairs coordinator position. And this change will provide the support to implement MBCP's strategy in customer service and business and community development. And this reclassification will result in an average monthly saving of $1,700. And then the last recommendation is to reclassify the regulatory legislative analyst position to regulatory legislative manager position. And this position will provide support for a wide range of MBCP's regulatory and legislative matters with the emphasis on representation of our interests at CPUC. And the reclassification will result in an average monthly increase of $1,700. Overall, the average monthly budgetary impact of all these changes will be $24,100. And then we need to seek your approval for the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay. Did you have something?
Just a minor item. It looks like the org chart doesn't actually have the title changes in it that are proposed. So just when you go to adopt the final org chart, I see the regulatory legislative analyst is still listed as an analyst there rather than manager. So minor item. It doesn't look like the title has made it into the actual org chart. So
it does.
I'm looking at it right now.
It's not something we need to worry about. Just make sure that the org chart
I think
reflects.
it's correct. You're correct. I'm seeing key account manager being under power supply.
Yeah.
That somehow this noted.
Okay,
Noted.
thank you.
Mr. Montoya?
Chair, Tom, is the $24,000 increase monthly already included in the budget that was adopted?
The 24,000.
The increase, is it included in the budget that we pushed forward already?
Oh, for that, I don't believe that to be the case. But remember, we are due to revise our budget in March. Back when we adopted the budget, it was clear that we just need to get something on paper for now, and that the understanding was 6 months we will get the budget all reviewed and revised, and eventually we'll come to you folks in, I guess in April, because you don't meet until April.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Great question. Any comments or questions on the board? Any member of the public wish to address this item?
Good morning. My name's Omar. I'm a resident of Salinas. I wanted to make note that the previous organizational chart had a specific box saying that there was a place for a community advisory committee, and I've seen that it was currently removed from the organizational chart, so I would like to find an explanation for that. Thank you.
I don't believe the org chart that we brought you back in September had the advisory committee in there. It may have, that box may have been with the PDAC report or some other reports, but the initial organization chart that we brought to you did not have any advisory committees at the time, if I remember correctly. Yeah, okay.
Any other member of the public? Great, bringing it back to the board. What's the pleasure of the board? Moved by Mr. Montoya. Is there a second? Second. Any further question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, moving on to item 14.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mark Buckman will be introducing this item.
This rate is part of our net energy metering policy. It often gets confused with net energy metering itself or a feed-in tariff. What net surplus compensation is for a customer that has generation, usually solar, when they are a true net generator, meaning they are exporting more power than they actually import from the grid, which is not the case for the majority of solar or other generation customers. For that excess power, PG&E compensates them at a low wholesale rate. Currently, it changes monthly based on the average rolling cost. Currently, as of January 2018, PG&E compensates at 2.8 cents per kilowatt hour. We have received a number of requests from the community to do better than PG&E when it comes to supporting solar customers. And we took that in mind. We also wanted to keep in mind not changing the incentives for financially, for system financials. We didn't want to incentivize developers to oversize systems or customers to oversize systems. So we're proposing a net surplus compensation rate of 6.1 cents for those solar customers and other generation customers that have actual net surplus on our service territory. This is a significant amount of volume from net surplus customers. Our data vendor estimated that there was approximately 8.7 gigawatt hours of energy that qualifies for net surplus compensation in an average year of operation. So it'll be less in 2018 just because of our enrollment schedule. So the cost difference to Monterey Bay Community Power for establishing the recommended rate at 6.1 cents instead of PG&E's rate represents about an additional $290,000 of additional cost in an average operation year to support solar customers.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? Mr. Baumann?
So, Tom, why not float on PG&E with a percentage rather than fixing a price? And then that way you don't have to deal with it every year?
We could. What we try to do is to establish a dollar figure that will be one fixed, so it doesn't float on a average of 5 months as PG&E does it. So those who already have solar installation will have a reasonable idea about how much they're going to be getting for their excess generation. And two, that number that we came up with is not just a random number. It's actually that the half the way between retail, our average retail price, and our average wholesale price. So we took all the energy that we're buying, we took the total amount of money that we're going to pay to buy it, and the result came to be 4 point something. Then we did the same thing on the retail end, and the result came to about 7 point something, and we did the halfway between the two numbers, and that's where the 6.135 cents came from. We're not, in the past, those folks used to get more than retail price to encourage people to put some solar rooftops and to put more solar on their properties. Now with solar being all over the place and it's causing issues for the operators, PG&E and the CPUC managed to work it out in a way that will say, we're not going to encourage this over-generation anymore. On micro-generation, we'll just give you barely wholesale prices, which is 2.9, which is really incredibly cheap. And it's obviously causing a lot of issues for people who already made the investments in building solar on the rooftops or elsewhere on their property. And they came to us and they've been going to the CPUC asking for a better way to price that excess generation. And so the idea was, yes, we recognize that you have done what you needed to do with the understanding that you're going to get better money for it. So we're going to pay you better than wholesale prices, but we don't want to pay you retail prices so you don't get into the habit of oversizing the solar installation on the account that you'll be able to make your money really quickly. And then, after 2-3 years, when you recovered your money, then it becomes your old gravy after that. So it is, I think, a midway policy to, one, encourage people to do it, but discourage them from oversizing their systems.
So as a follow-up question, then I assume that you have a high level of confidence that we can sustain this over a 5-10 year period.
I think at $290,000 for what's in place already, that is roughly a little over 0.1% of our total budget. I think we probably can sustain it. Yes.
Mr. Chair, so I'm curious. So the savings is going to be the same schedule for retail or for commercial customers as it is for residential. What about schools and government buildings, that type of stuff?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Any overgeneration, that's the rate you get.
So I see that the rate was derived essentially the average of the wholesale rate, averaging the average wholesale rate and average retail rate. I guess my initial intuition is that really the driver here is the wholesale rate. Is what's the incremental cost that we're paying above our average wholesale rate, because that's the option, right? Is to go alternatively, but just buy it on the wholesale market. So it looks like we're about 33% over our average wholesale rate with this proposed figure. I understand, I guess, the notion for certainty and trying to establish it and fix it at each year. Maybe rather than averaging between the retail rate and the wholesale rate, kind of pegging it to our wholesale rate, or are you concerned about kind of the long-term viability of these local projects if our wholesale rate continues to decline? I guess just help me with that a little bit.
We can establish it at a percent of above the wholesale rate. And the only concern that I would have is if we get to a point in any given year in order to remain competitive, and we have to bring our retail rate very close to our wholesale rate, then we're back again paying retail prices. And above, maybe if we establish a percentage.
So just to follow up, so doesn't look like there's a cap on it then right now?
It will be an annual number that we will establish every budget. Okay. On October of every year, we'll find out what the average of retail and wholesale, and the price will be somewhere in between.
Okay, perfect.
And then presumably, if you had a large enough power generator, let's say one of the municipalities around here developed some sort of facility, there could be a longer-term power purchase contract which would operate outside of this
That's
structure?
correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any more? Any other comments, questions on the board? Any member of the public?
I think many people put a value on distributed rooftop solar. Besides the financial considerations, a distributed system is more resilient, requires less infrastructure in terms of power distribution. And is part of bringing the creation of more local rooftop solar as part of the goal of Monterey Bay Community Power of bringing local jobs to the area and getting those systems built and maintained. And I think just, it also means less disturbed land instead of building utility scale solar. And rooftop solar certainly is not going to replace our need for renewable energy. It's a relatively small portion of the total load. But to put this proposal in context, I just did a little research on all the other CCEs that are operating or in the process of getting set up. And almost all of them pay full retail for excess generation on their NEM customers. Marin and Sonoma County and Peninsula Energy actually pay full retail plus a penny to encourage more local generation. And I think for the reasons that I was talking about, there's a value besides the bottom line for Monterey Bay Community Power, which obviously that's real important too. But I think maybe both these things can be accomplished or accommodated. Clean Power San Francisco and Silicon Valley Clean Energy that are just getting set up now. They both play full retail without the extra penny. And that makes a big difference because they pay full retail taking into account the time of use rate. So actually for solar, that's a big benefit because a lot of the generation is happening during peak hours. So I'd encourage you to think about, I know that in the first couple of years, funds are more of a consideration, but to think about in light of what all these other organizations are doing, think about the possibility of another perspective on how you might approach setting these. And certainly, with the idea in the future that we should be increasing these rates as we can afford to. But in the context of all the other CEs, this is a very low rate, so I'd encourage you to look at a higher rate.
Any other comments from the public? Bringing it back to the board. What's the will of the board? Been moving, Mr. Montoya.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, we're item 15. We're in adjournment. Thank you, guys. See you guys in April.